Hey there, Outliers. Niiamah Shang here. Wow, I feel like pretty excited to be with you here on the Outliers Edge podcast. Today we have an incredible roundtable. We have Dwight Hurst and Josh Brandon joining us for the roundtable, and they're going to share a bit of their experience, and we're going to dive into some of the questions that are both top of mind for the three of us when it comes to leveling up, continuing to do great work out in the world and growing from there. So why don't I give you a chance to get to know these two esteemed guests of ours? Why don't we start off here with you, Josh? Josh, can you let us know more about you and the game you're currently playing?
Well, the game I'm currently playing is trying to inspire others to speak their truth and have their platform like we all do. My journey is unique through the world of broadcasting as a programmer and a personality and a talent coach. So I spend my days nowadays just trying to get people to create more compelling content on social media and launch the podcast, write the book, do the thing, write the script, whatever it is that they've always wanted to do. Um, I wrote the book Influence, the Compassion and Critical Thinking Workbook, and I host the podcast Overthinking Everything. And other than that, I'm just an actor and a voiceover artist and a dad and a cat dad.
Just a few of those other things, right?
A few things.
I love that.
The
Like
word just
outliers.
is doing some heavy lifting in that sentence, right?
Dwight, you got it. You know,
Yeah,
outliers. You can.
I want to do it all.
Yeah. You're in good company for that. That's it. In case you didn't hear it out, like you said, I want to do it all. And I think we get that. We get that. Well, thanks for being here, Josh. We're going to explore how you do it all and all those different parts. I also appreciate you bringing all of you here as opposed to just trying to like bring it to just one thing. You
Thanks,
know,
man.
like we are multidimensional people. So thanks for bringing that. Dwight, we'd love to get to know you. Share a bit about you and the game you're currently playing.
Yeah, thank you. I sure, there was a noise there. Sorry about that. Didn't turn something off. I really, really empathize with the want to do it all. I like to say I've never met an idea that I didn't think was a great one. And that's just part of, I've learned that that's just part of my brain. I have to be a little cautious about that when negotiating them. So my name's Dwight Hurst, and I'm the creator and host of the Broken Brain podcast, which is the current description of the show is that it is about the intersection of psychology and culture. I've experimented with different descriptions, but that's the best one. I've been doing that since about 2014, so coming up in the 10th year,
Wow.
when there just weren't as many back then, and I really wanted to do one. So I'm also a psychotherapist. I have a private practice where I work with trauma, addiction, and just major life changes is one of the major descriptions of my specialty. I tend to, boy, do a lot of different things. The podcast gives me a window into the world of the arts and creative. I like to write myself, and I get to talk to a lot of authors. I've gotten to do more in the realm of like film review for independent films and interviewing creators. And currently, one of my big projects is that I'm adapting and using role playing games, tabletop role playing games, that kind of stuff into therapy. Been doing that with social skill instructions for young people for a long time, and just working into some adult groups and individual interventions based off of imaginative play. So a lot of stuff that I mess with.
Hmm.
Oh wow, I am very excited for this conversation. Like both of you, I think are part of what I really appreciate both of you. Is I feel you're going to challenge me in all the right ways, and I think that in the challenging thing is in the space of what is possible and how we bring like these ideas that most people wouldn't think would work into fruition, into life. You know, Dwight, it's nice talking to you here. I recorded my first podcast in 2014 myself.
There you go.
So it's like it's cool being in space there. I'm like, oh yeah, back like I'm like this mature platform. I'm like, is it there? We still have a
To
lot more to go.
to feel like the a little bit of the old guard when it
Mhm.
comes to a certain medium, that's an interesting feeling to have, you know?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Well, look, let's dive in here. Uh, I'm actually really curious, Dwight. I usually have like another question that gets us started, but you brought up some things in your introduction that got me thinking here. And you talked about, I feel like you talked about major life changes. People come to you for that. And Josh, it felt like you're like when people are ready to actually bring their thing to life, and
Mm.
we can come together there. You talk about Dwight, you brought up role playing games, and right now I'm playing a tabletop role playing games. I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons for the first time. I just finished my first ever campaign. It was supposed to be a 6 week campaign. 9 months later, we finished it.
There
You
you
know,
go. That's the way.
that's how it is. I find it really intriguing that you're pioneering into like this imaginative play and incorporating that into therapy. Do you mind sharing kind of like the high levels of that overall, just so we can kind of like see a bit of like what you are creating, and then I'm going to ask a bit about like what it's like to walk into that. But can you just help us see it first?
Absolutely. It's funny because having been a lifelong nerd and fandom guy, I actually got into it through my job because with another colleague of mine, we started a social skills group for young people, teenagers who many are on the autism spectrum or have strong social anxiety, ADHD, and we started alternating. We would do activities and games one week, and then the next week we would do lessons, right? And at one point we noticed that the lessons did not really seem to be helping that much, and that gameplay actually was teaching them more than the other. Around that same time, one of the dads of a kid who'd been coming for a while, who's a long time D&D enthusiast, he started doing a campaign. So every other week, we would do the kids would come in and play card games or games, and they'd teach us how to do some of their favorites. And then the other weeks, we did a campaign, and it's still ongoing actually. And so that's what got me into doing it. And then I started to look at all the different. There's so many different. And right now is a golden time for there's go on Kickstarter and look up RPG, and you'll see, right? There's a billion with every IP you can think of. There's an RPG for Watership Down, for example. That one's from a long time ago, but
Yeah,
anyway, just kind of learning that and adapting it. Yeah, is
that was
what.
that was traumatic for me. I don't know. I don't want to relive it.
The new Netflix series not quite as traumatic as the old '70s movie that I saw
They
growing up. Oh my
they
word!
showed that in middle school. Are you
Yeah,
kidding me?
yes.
That's what
I
keeps you in business, my friend. Is
I'm old enough that I didn't remember much of it except being terrified of the villain rabbit.
yeah.
This is now a Watership Down fan cast. We're taking over. Sorry about that, Niiamah. No,
No, we're good.
Niiamah.
We're good. Like this is, I really love the flow. I feel like today we can flow quite a bit. So so what I'm hearing here, and I want to kind of play some of this out here because ally is one of the things that like Dwight has immediately brought in a place where in my mind you kicked open the doors of what possibility could be, you know. And so I'm just going to kind of piece back some of the things that I heard from you in case anyone's listening to this. So like what I heard was that y'all were experimenting, playing around. You had some idea, and you started off with that. You're like, all right, let's do activities and games, and then let's go with lessons, you know. And then you implemented that, and then you saw whether or not it was like you started to see the results, and you're like, wait a minute, one of these things is working better than the other, and you allowed yourself to like. And this is important to me because like I would feel that you allowed yourself to go with to let the results speak for themselves and like go the unconventional route rather than like the textbook way of doing things. Can you speak a little bit to that, and then I'm going to go over to Josh in a bit, but I want to like to speak to that because I know that there are outliers out there that are listening to this and being like, well, I can't really just bring my da, 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 and bring it into what I do. No one will take me seriously. And while yes, I know they get better results, but it's not the standard practice. So X, Y, you know. So I'd love if you don't mind just speaking to that.
Yeah, it was interesting to see. So, for example, with the D&D, when we have a young person in there who says something like, "Yeah, I tell everybody about the thing I saw," then our DM and me, we kick in and go, "Great, but you got to say it. You got to say it." And so they're practicing the social skill. And one of the big you mentioned one of the big obstacles to this kind of thing is like, I believe in this. I know it has benefits. You can point out there's other therapists mess around with this, but one of the biggest obstacles to trying something new, especially if it touches on something you're not sure everybody's going to understand, is that we don't know how to explain it. So do I tell somebody, as I've been writing this up on my Psychology Today profile and on my website, and how do I put this here and be like, this is not Dwight's RPG stuff over here and Dwight's mental health practice. This is both. We're using this for a mental health tool. And I think when we're scared to say something and we don't say it, we don't give people an opportunity. It'd be like if the three of us never put out an episode of our podcast, we never find our listeners, right?
We wouldn't find
Because
each other. Like,
exactly. I mean, think about 2014 when you told people, "Yeah, I'm doing a podcast." They're like, "What the hell is a podcast?" Right? And now it's like we're nervous because everybody does one, right? And
yes.
so we're always getting in our own way of experimenting, I think.
Yeah,
Right?
I appreciate that, Dwight. Yeah, um, I love these conversations when we immediately go into the psyche of like what the outlier is experiencing. So, Josh, I'm going to come to you, right? Because you also help bring in things that like, we have visions of what we want, or we have like desires that we want, and then it's like, but like, can we actually bring it out to life here? And so I'll be curious for you, like what's something that you have brought to life in your work or in your life that most other people may not like understand, or most other people might like, yeah, that most other people may not understand. I'm really curious about that. Like in what ways are you playing this game? And then we can share and talk about your experience with that.
You know, personally, selfishly, the side of me is the indulgence of everything that I'm capable of doing. I finally have the freedom and ability to do that. And if I get a song in my head that I can't get out of my head, then I go in my studio here and I sing my song and I mix a track and I release that song and I get it out of my head. And before it would drive me mad, it'd be in the back of my head and I'd have to put that in a box and shove it in a shelf and it just get that out of the way because it's ringing in my head and I can't think of anything else. And now I have the ability to be, to do that, and fill in the blank, whether it's music, books, podcast, any of that. My podcast started as a way to get some sort of issues related ideas out of my head, mostly out of frustration because I had creative things I wanted to do. I wanted to tell fun stories and be haha funny and make good content. And then I started my podcast, and it just um, sort of became the kind of overarching brand of everything that I do, that it's overthinking everything. So it's like, okay, well, everything I write is overthinking everything about something. And that's my perspective on it because I'm not a classic overthinker. I'm somebody who's gone through a lot of therapy and has learned how to like sort of analyze things in different ways through different perspectives. And so that's how I present information in my podcast. And that's what led to the books that I'm writing. And, you know, you mentioned something when we spoke earlier that it was, people might feel overwhelmed when they talk to me because, I think of I don't know if anybody follows sports. I don't really so much anymore, but I think of myself as Cordell Stewart. They called him Slash because he was a quarterback and a running back and a wide receiver and a kick returner and defensive player if you needed him to be, and coach and whatever, he was everything, and he was good at all of it, you know, and he was kind of one of a kind player in football. No, there just aren't a lot like him, and I like doing a lot of things. So selfishly, I get to focus on doing a lot of things I like to do, but the giving side of that is I get to empower people to do anything they want to do and live. I get to live by example. None of the things I do is easy, but I've found ways to empower people to do it because it's never been easier than it is now. Like when y'all started your podcast, I started a few years after y'all, but I started overthinking everything and I hated it. I didn't like the way it was. I wanted a video presentation. I wanted it to look good and sound good. And I just didn't have those resources. So I took it down, stripped it down, rewrote it, released it, and put it out. And even now, the earlier episodes that I did, like I'm 63, 64 episodes in, I got 20 left to go. The first few episodes, I'd love to recut because you grow and you learn as you do things, you know. So, but I'm moving on and I'm moving forward and creating more stuff because that's just as I empower people. When you start that process, the floodgates open, and so it's just about moving forward and keeping it flowing and creating more and more and more, moving to the next thing.
All right, so let's talk about the floodgates being open. I like this element here, and uh, Yeah, I'll do this, and I'll this time I'm going to come in and introduce this topic, but as we go on, we can just kind of bounce off each other. All right. You talk about the floodgates being open. I kind of want to talk about like when things get into momentum, right? When you start to take things on, at first it's like there's not traction, and then the floodgates start opening. And I'm really curious about how y'all have like navigated that as it goes in. It's like almost like from crickets to like, oh wow, like there's a lot coming my way.
Yeah.
And there's still more that I want to do as well. I'm very curious how y'all have handled that, how y'all look at that right now. I'll leave that as an open question here. Dwight or Josh, either of you want feel compelled to speak to this?
Well, I'll jump in. My perspective has actually been shaped by some interesting life events. I have always had organizational issues, which makes it very difficult to start something. And for a long time, and I still feel this, but now I know why. You'll see in a second. I would have this feeling of like, this is the best idea in the whole world. And I pursue it. And I just feel like I did so much on it. And then it doesn't work after a little while or a few months go by and whatever. And it's like, yeah, that never worked. How depressing. Doesn't the world suck? And because it's the world's fault, right? It's not mine. But anyway, but I went through some experiences that led me to learn that with my own mental health, where I was able to hone down. I talk a lot about this very often on my show. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I was able to recognize the mood cycling and the manic and things. So, being balanced and getting therapy and medication kind of helps to tighten that up a little. But now I realize that sometimes when I was like, felt like I was doing everything in the world to make something happen, I was doing everything in the world in here, and I'm tapping my head for you on the audio here, and I was making lists and maybe getting an internet thing set up, domain set up, or making cover art for a flyer and things. And as far as what I was doing externally that would ever connect with anybody knowing this exists, that wasn't I'd burn out on the other stuff, and then I wonder why it never worked, and I was just blind to that. So I guess learning the way that we work, that our brain works, and things like that, and for me, mental health is a big, huge part of that. To say, oh yeah, I'm starting to feel burned out. Have I really? Have I really done very much yet? Let me assess that and try to take it a thing at a time.
I get a lot of that. I think for me, I find um, balancing the different things that I've got on my creative plate. When I sit down and I'm 8 chapters in, almost done with the first draft of a manuscript of a new book, and so I'm like, sometimes I sit down and it just pours out of me, and sometimes it doesn't, and so I try to do some self-reflection on what's that block, and if it's another project that's weighing on my mind, then I turn my attention to that, and maybe I spend a few minutes on that. And I've always, you all know, if you've got a podcast, that in and of itself is a full-time marketing branding gig. So I've always got something to turn myself to, and all of it is my passion. All of it is stuff I love to do. If I don't, I don't have time for hobbies. I wish I did. But I don't even know what my hobby would be, because my passion is my hobby and my business is my passion. And so I've just find something you love to do and do it. And so it may be a confusing business model, but I've always got a plate to spin. So I just kind of move on and migrate to the next um, faucet, whichever one is dripping the fastest. I try to milk that cow as fast as I can and move on to the next utterly ridiculous idea.
I see what you did
Uh,
there. I
Oh, I
I
just got it.
love yeah. I love when you're talking about when you say like the overthinking piece.
yeah.
For me, that was one of my big changes. Taking my podcast for example, when I got I kind of and I love to try to streamline things because if I don't, I won't do them. If I get overly in the weeds of okay, I've got all these episodes stacked up and I got to do so much to each of them, it's like Nope, I got my system now. I got a little pad, I got a little timestamp if there's a big problem. If there's not a big problem, the interview may just be good to go. And I know the sound things I've got. And if I can get it ready to go within 24 hours, then I can post it whenever. And if I don't, I know my brain, I'm going to be like, I forgot about that. And I get an email from someone, hey, is that coming out soon? I'm like, oh, yeah, well, I forgot
Mhm.
that time passed.
Yeah.
So I love that when you're saying like trying to me, that's what it's, I think of it as streamlining a project to
Mhm.
say, I can turn it around. Right. And otherwise I just don't do anything with it. And with the intentions don't, intentions for perfection get in the way of just producing anything.
But I think also too, don't you find that if you have an idea that doesn't work. And I put it in quotations because it all feeds off of things. My podcast workshop, this whole idea that I've done now has been years in the making. I had this original idea for something much broader and really just built on a witty marketing angle. I like wordplay. So it made sense, and I started to visualize commercials and all this other stuff, but it was ultimately about helping people achieve their dream, achieve their goal. I should never I've passed up opportunity so many times in my life that I almost feel embarrassed when I get opportunities because it's like I've not answered the door when it's been knocked at. And now that people are knocking on my door and I'm able to answer that door and go on the call, that means everything. And so I want to empower more people to be able to do that. But to do that, it takes a lot of organization, which is not my strongest suit. Um, yeah, so I find that I find trying to find time to do everything that I want to do um, is difficult, but it's like I'm not taking a whole lot of time away from all the things, because I'm not really a movie buff. I'm not taking 2 hours out of the day watching a new movie. I do enjoy it, but I'm always
So,
thinking I need to create content. I need to make a video about this thing. What am I watching this movie for? I'll watch it later. I got things to do.
so I'm going to play in on this here because, there's an element of like the organization. It's come up a couple different times here. And I'm thinking right now I'm in a place of streamlining myself for having been doing podcasting and business for a number of years. I kind of like someone mentioned like the graveyard of like well-intentioned courses and like all these other ideas that have started and like fallen to the wayside. And when I think about the idea of streamlining, I look at like that's where I'm at right now. Looking at this and saying, "Hey, what would it look like to make this one process amazing and to make this to like get the real returns that are possible from this?" So I'm curious for you all, like when it comes to and this right, this might be someplace that you lean in more than Josh, and if that's the case, then that's the case. But when it comes to like various systems that you have, as well as getting help from outside of yourself, right? Um, let's see. I think the question here for me, I'm curious about like what systems you have and how you think about it and the streamlining process and all that. But I'm going to get into like what's the question underneath the question? Because we all know we could have systems, we could get other people to help us. I think the thing here is like when you weren't doing it, why? Like, are you doing it? One, and then the second thing is when you weren't doing it, what actually helped you to say, oh, wait, now is the time for me to actually prioritize this?
Mhm.
Dwight, let's start with you and then I'll come to you, Josh.
Yeah. It's a big ongoing question. I find that especially if we have any kind of attention sort of issues, which goes along for me with my brain has this craving for novelty. And so I've had to learn that, for example, organizational methods, right? If I keep a list in a notebook and every day I check that notebook, I have to leave the notebook on my desk because if I don't see it, it doesn't exist, right? And also, after sometimes a few weeks, sometimes a month, sometimes 2 months, I don't notice that notebook anymore. So I have to switch and I use post-it notes or I use a little whiteboard or I have a number of different things that I've used And I have found, and I work with my clients on this too, trying to cycle back through things that used to work. I'm going to pull out when the post-it notes aren't working anymore. I'm going to pull out the notebook again, see what happens. And sometimes I can click in. So for me, trying to keep a differing approach for organization where I have to mix, I don't find a routine and then it works. I find a routine and then it works for a little while.
Mm.
And rather than giving up, varying that approach, that's been huge for me. And I mean, to that other part, you mentioned kind of the graveyard idea. When I look back at like, here's all these lists and goals, or I look at my website and like, here's these pages that I used to have published that I pulled back and they're still there. And I have that part of me that's like, oh, you never did that. You got to do that. No, 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 no. And it's funny because I think a lot of people have heard of this approach, like the Marie Kondo self organization. You organize your house and stuff. And the most famous thing she says is, you pick up all your possessions or whatever one at a time, and you say, does this pen here that I'm holding, does this bring me joy, or essentially is it a burden, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a burden, chuck it, if you can, or get rid of it, give it away, whatever. And I started applying that to ideas and saying, here's the thing I haven't done for a long time. Have I not done it because I really want to and I just can't get started? And it feels like a joyful source potentially, even if I have regret. Or is this one that it's like, I must not really want to do this. Maybe there's a thing I think I should do. And, maybe I heard it was profitable, or maybe I just thought it was something other people wanted, or maybe I liked the idea, but I don't like doing it. Chuck it. Don't be afraid to chuck it, because if I have 50 million ideas, I'm only going to do 3 of them probably. Let's be honest.
So any thoughts on this here? Thank you, Dwight.
While he's talking, I'm looking up at my whiteboard where I've got my many different things listed of things that I've intended on doing, and some of them are not. I've left this up here because I've got another method of organization for ideas. So this has just kind of become the thing that sort of taunts me, of the things that I thought were really good ideas, that every so often I can look up and like, children's book, got it. I've got to work on that. And it's, yeah, I totally get that. Some of those ideas, it's about prioritization, and I go through them sometimes and I look and I say, okay, so this idea was a good idea a year and a half ago when I first had it, but the world's changed now. It's a different atmosphere in this, whatever it is. So, okay, well, we'll just put that over here. And, I've sat on songs for too long because I just couldn't get the melody right or something like that. Didn't mean they weren't great songs or anything like that. It's just, I've learned that if something isn't clicking in the moment, don't force it. I got a lot of
Yeah.
shelf space in my head, so I'll just put it over here and I'll cycle back around to it if it's worth cycling back around to. I've got multiple projects that are in various various forms of completion, but
And don't
I just go with where the flow is.
Yeah, and don't you think sometimes the thing I didn't do leads to the thing I will?
Hmm.
Like the song I didn't write, that
Hmm.
thought process is going to be informed in the song you do write eventually.
Yeah,
That type of thing.
yeah, I had a song that was, it was just like a kind of tongue-in-cheek song, but it sort of got in my head, and it was to the Hamilton, like it was sounded Hamiltonish, you know, and the final product ended up being nothing like it, but it was like, but it gave me that dun 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 da da da, which didn't even lead to that song, but it was like it got me that melody enough to where I could take this one witty lyric and grow it to something else. And like I said, the coaching thing, it was started out as something where I was coaching acting and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, everything I looked at in that previous iteration, even the podcast thing is more about other things than podcast. But the it was always about more than trying to get people to, how do you get an agent? How do you book a commercial? I'm not interested in that stuff as much. And other coaches can teach you that stuff. Other podcasters and creators can talk to you about stuff. I want to talk to people about how how you can give yourself permission to do the thing that you've been denying yourself all these years. And that's what you do, and you do, or you, whichever direction you are. It's what we all do, and that's I think important for other people. And I think that's what inspires.
It's made me realize that that I'm probably currently upside down in this great on this great marble of Earth. At some point, it's like
Right.
I experience my
Somebody's
life as right
perspective.
side up, but probably upside down. With all that being said, here I want to go in a slightly different direction. This is the question I typically ask at the beginning of the conversation, and like I get with both of you that y'all have good energy and that you are out in the world creating and doing things that are in alignment and like it's just good, clean energy. Where I want to play here is now I want to get a little bit deeper, and I also want to look into some of the things where, um, yeah, some of the challenges along the way. I'm not going to start. I'm going to start off first though with I want to understand like how like something that you believe to be true that you had to either let go of or upgrade in order to play at the level that you're playing right now. And if you really want to go for it, it'd be like the mindset or the belief that you are like you feel right now. You actually are trying to challenge so that you can get to whatever the next level is. So there's two levels of this here. You can choose to play at the level that feels great for you. Dwight, you want to start us off?
I I think that the for me and maybe for others, I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but
Yeah, please just speak for you. This
yeah,
is great.
for
We're here for
me,
you.
the perfectionism, and here's the thing about perfectionism. We all know that word, and we all say, "I know I'm not perfect, but," and there's the but, and then I think it's almost at that lower conscious level we're seeking it. For me, some of that has to do with doing things in a public space, and that can be just much as marketing and advertising something or putting out there. I really liked what you said, Josh, about like my former episodes. That's a real measurable one for me because those are public, right? And there's this part of me that's like I should re-edit or take that one down or something because it's just not as good. It just
Mhm.
doesn't sound as good. The sound quality's off. I didn't know what I was doing yet. But for me, it's been important to try to keep them up and to try to get away from this idea of polished perfectionism being the goal. And uh, just and part of that just has to do with I think personally too, having life events and setbacks and things that we go through, and for me, just learning that it's okay. We're gonna The piece of advice that I got was one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten was just when I was talking about to someone. I was talking to it wasn't my therapist, but it was another mental health person, and I was saying that I have this anxiety around disappointing or letting anyone down. It's one of the hugest anxieties in my life. It's been a huge obstacle to lots of things. And he said this very interesting thing. He said, "Oh, that's hard because you are gonna always, and they're gonna let you down. You probably don't notice that, do you? Because you're focused on how bad you might. But everyone if you know them long enough, will let you down and disappoint you, and you will let them down and disappoint them. That's part of it. That's part of being people. And that's one of the best pieces of advice, personally or professionally, that I've gotten. And so I just don't try. No, just kidding. That's not what I'm saying. No, but it's to accept that that's the case, I think opens the door then to work better with ourselves and with others because we don't have that burden of expectation.
I love this. I often say I'm a recovering people pleaser, and so when you say like when you talk about like that's part of it, I recognize that outliers. A lot of you are like me in various ways, right? And so when I hear you say this here, there's a part of me that just like breathes in. It's like, oh wait, uh, uh, this is actually becoming real for me, really real for me in entrepreneurship, where it's like I've listened to a lot of other people talk about like the goods, the ups and the downs, right? And I think that for the first time, I'm like really feeling like, oh, this feels like a lot, this is a lot more work than I've been doing, you know? Well, what like things about payroll, all this stuff, it's like it all became real. And I started realizing like, oh, this is actually part of it. This is like if you're actually in the game, this is what it feels like. Thanks for that, Dwight.
You're
Um,
welcome.
Josh, how about you? What's a belief that came along with you?
You know, this I love all of what you said, Dwight. That was I'm sitting here smiling and nodding because you're speaking into my soul. You're scooping a big old finger dollop of the raspberry filling out of my donut, and you're doing a great job. My spirit is full. I mean that because this is a great conversation. One of the things that I have to let go of, and it sounds counterintuitive, I think, for what I do, um, and what I have done my entire life, is I have to release the need for an audience. That we get caught up sometimes, all of us, in the validation, because ultimately we have an idea, we have a perspective, we have something we want to say, and when that's not heard in a way that's compensatory to our workload and the way we value that, there's a disappointment that we feel that you know that we weren't validated in that way. And it's just natural. If you're creative and you have a vision, something to say, and you're bold enough to say it, then we've all had that, "Oh, why aren't you listening to me?" moment. And all the businesses that I work in, from voice acting public speaking, all these things. But if I go to a book event, it's all about rejection. More people are going to say no to me on any given day than the people that will say yes. That's math. If I do it right, if I do it right, more people, I mean, the idea is more people say yes. That doesn't work out with a lot of people. But so, the idea is just cast your net broader. And so, I have to let go of the fact that everything that I produce is my baby and everyone should love my baby. What I encourage people to do is release that. If you get the gratification, then that's awesome. Let it feed you. You can also go out and buy that gratification, which is what a lot of folks do. If you want success these days, this isn't the COVID era where everything just makes it. This is a very competitive arena. So success comes with a cost usually, and most
Let's
of
let's
those
talk about
are
that. Let's talk about real quick here because I want to get into the cost
sure.
of success, right? And we've each had different costs along the way. Some of them have been smaller, some of them have been like, you know, really, really large, and not all, and typically they're not financial. When we talk about these costs here, right? I'm thinking to myself about like my number one fear is being alone. And I recognize that every time I want to keep going and growing, like eventually at the end of it all, it comes down to like, oh, Niiamah, are you willing to be more alone by being the only one who's doing this or the one that's doing this? Or potentially having people say, I don't like I like you for the warm and fuzzies that I got from you, but then you started getting real and I don't want to get real. And so now you're going to be alone because I'm leaving you, you know? So I would love to talk about the cost here for you all because I also believe now that that's part of it. You know, that's why I really like that. It's a love. I'm also thinking about at the same time David S. Skeletons or something from SNL and David S. Pumpkins from SNL Halloween. It's part of it. But
It is, man.
I would love to like hear in a bit about like some of the costs that it's taken for you to show up the way that you do. We're gonna start wrapping up the conversation overall. I'm not gonna leave it in like in this space, but I love it when we get real with it. What do you got for us, Dwight?
The well, I think the a lot of that cost is a feeling of comfort. And when we're talking about in the public space, I know I keep coming back to this, but there's a privacy element because you don't know. And also, I'm not a big like read my own reviews kind of person because I'm sensitive or whatever. But when you read those kinds of things and it's like, oh, somebody, first time I saw it, somebody posted a review. It doesn't matter how many good ones, right? It's the one that's like, oh, this show sucks. Um, or when I've been giving trainings, like in a conference, and I look at it and I see that one person with a dour face. Doesn't matter if everyone else is participating, and it's like I'm now talking to that one person. And there's a certain amount of comfort to give up. And there's a certain amount of pride, I guess, to try to sacrifice. But those are things you want to, I guess. So I don't mean to hide behind that. Those are like, this is not like, what's your biggest weakness? I'm too hard of a worker. I don't mean it like that. Um, but I think that time and comfort, in a way, that's a cost. And I think that it's easy to say, let me throw all that away like it's a good thing. But I think having privacy, time, and comfort, we can overdo it. Like we need to sometimes not overspend our time, because it's easy to justify because I got to get an episode out next week, right? But it's like, but maybe I need to do something with my kids first instead of after, right? And things like that. So
Yeah, all of that, and and double down on it. Specifically the time that it takes. Like I realized at one point that I was in this room almost 20 hours a day at one point, and I don't regret it. My wife has a job and she's busy and she has a lot. I mean, she's healthcare, so she's always charting. So it's not like we're spending like a lot of time together. It's like, is Phyllis's toe knuckle still bruised? Whatever it is, I don't know. But it's so we don't, we make time for each other. My daughter's grown. I help take care of my mom. And so far she's self-sufficient in a lot of ways. So time and focus away from some of the things that are really important. Like I'd love to just sit around and talk to my mom all day. um and maybe I'll make a podcast out of that because she's a hoot and a half.
there you
um
go. See, that's what, yeah, we're always working
yeah,
that in. Where's this content coming from? Right,
it
right. Yeah.
it really is. And I'm not, I think my wife's hilarious, and if she felt more comfortable on camera, but it that goes into what I tell people. I want to underscore what Dwight said here. Your privacy, you can never get that back. And I speak from a point of perspective, man. I've been in the public eye since I'm 19 years old, right? So I joke that I sold my soul before I knew what it was worth. And that privacy, that ability to just exist where your high school classmates you never wanted to connect with again, where you're easy to find. You know what I mean? Like, um, and it was harder to deal with when I was younger, and it's because it wasn't so prevalent. We weren't like this on social media where like we're little profile pictures where everybody is. This was the 90s where you had to look in a big book of yellow pages to find someone's address and send them a mail through AOL if you're lucky. So the privacy aspect before somebody wants to step out on that public stage, you can do that and hide behind different names and emojis and maybe a graphic that represents your character that you're hosting. But if you really want to connect authentically with people, people connect authentically with people. And and the cost of that are parasocial relationships and some really um you know questionable space that happens if the more you put yourself out there. You just have to be prepared for it.
Well, I appreciate I appreciate y'all bringing things into this perspective here. I have found that when you're in the mix and you think that things aren't working, it's really helpful to have a reminder of like, this is what working looks like. It's like in the middle of open heart surgery. I'm not a surgeon. I imagine that there's still a lot of blood that goes around, and it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It's just part of the process. It's just part of it. So outliers, take from this and grow with it. And I'm going to ask you here to join us here as we grow. And my ask is that you think of one person in your world who would grow from this conversation. This is we have a thing that we call the one person, one conversation at a time initiative. And so please go feel free, share this on your socials, share this with your platform, let as many people as you know, as you want to know, like know about this. But then find one person and let them know about this conversation and tell them why you thought of them and why you wanted to share this conversation with them. And maybe you're the person that someone thought of for you. My ask is like, just continue paying it forward. This is how I don't know. I think underneath all the flash and the volume, I love volume, y'all. I think there's something about this, like a real connection, one person at a time, that I really think is actually how we're going to keep growing and with each other. So, Dwight, Josh, I'm really grateful for you spending your time here, sharing your experiences here. We have a minute before we wrap up today. My question for you is this: I want to find out how people can go deeper into your world, and then if you can also share an insight that you got from this conversation. Outliers are taken care of now; so you don't have to worry about that. They get what they get from this. I'm curious about what you got from this for yourself. All right, and if you didn't get anything, like just be like, not didn't land this time, and that's fine. That's totally fine. Like I'm open to it. Why don't we start with you, Josh, and then we'll wrap up with you, Dwight, and then we'll be right at the top of the hour.
Yeah, I'm good. I knew everything coming in here.
All right,
No,
that happens. That
no,
happens.
not at all. I think I'll lead with the power that it's always great to know that you're not alone. That these conversations are powerful because we're not the only three people having it. That there are people listening to it. There are people that we will interact with after this conversation, and to know that, you know, not only is there probably another podcast that's kind of similar in vein, and that's fun to know people in that field, but it's nice to meet people who have struggled the same ways and come to same realizations and are energized in the same creativity. Um, and so that for that, I thank you, Dwight, and you've helped me in a lot of ways. Like I wasn't sure who would be on a panel, but you never know. But this was beneficial in our conversation uh, before. In our conversation before, I never know which direction anyone is, but our conversation helped me tremendously too.
You got it.
I'm at my talent coaching is at my podcast workshop for social media content creators, authors, whatever. And the rest of the information about me is at joshbrandonmedia.com, and everybody can find me in all those places. And I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you so much, Josh. How about you, Dwight?
Well, as far as I had such a feeling of validation, but also an insight, Josh, when you were talking about your whiteboard, when you look over to the side, and it validated that feeling I have of like it's okay to let some of those things go, but just when you were talking about like the Hamilton thing, when you talked about that of like this is what feels right today, and how the elements of that transferred over to what ended up being the right thing for later,
Hmm.
that was just very powerful for me. I like that. I'm grateful for you for sharing that because it gave me that general validation, but then a very specific idea. I know I'm going to be thinking that when I'm working on projects of that Hamilton music thing will be there. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So best point of reference for me is if you go to just dwighthurst.com is if you want to learn more about any of the things I'm doing. And there's just a bunch of, dwighthurst.com slash this, you can go to slash podcast, learn more about the show. You can go to slash RPG if you want to learn more about, and I am looking for people who want to kind of do some pilot experiments with me there. So you can contact there. You can also shoot me an email at dwighthurst@gmail.com. And then, of course, the Broken Brain podcast is available on any of your podcatchers out there.
Well, I appreciate you both for this conversation. I gained a lot here. I know actually, Outliers did the same here. Just know that we're thinking about you and we're continuing to grow with you. Outliers, until the next time we talk, remember this: be you on purpose. Journey on.